Let's look at real numbers when we're dealing with lesson 4. And first, we want to talk about sign rules for adding and subtracting. Now, this means that some of your numbers are going to be positive and some negative. If they both have the same sign, then you're going to add the numbers and keep the sign. In other words, you would add two positives together and you would have a positive number. You would also add two negative numbers together. You would just have a negative answer. However, if the signs are not alike, if one is positive and one is negative, then you always subtract the numbers, and then you keep the sign of which one is the larger. When we say larger, we mean the absolute value larger. Example number 1 is a perfect example because we have a positive 9, and we're going to add a negative 12. Now, that's the same way we could have written it like this, 9 minus 12, okay? One's positive, one's negative, but the addition and subtraction is their operation. What we really do is subtract the numbers. We say 12 minus 9 because we have to, and it says 3, but we keep the sign of the larger one, which was a negative, and it's negative 3 is our answer. Look at number 2. We have two negative numbers. We have negative 6 plus negative 14. We could have been written like this, negative 6 minus 14. Both are negative numbers, so we'll add them together and get 20, and we keep the sign, which was negative in both of them, so it's going to be an answer as a negative 20. Example 3 is negative 5 plus 9. So we will, because we have opposite signs, we'll subtract them. We'll really say 9 minus 5 gives us a 4. And we keep the sign of the larger. Well, 9 was larger, so it's a positive 4. Example 4, we've got absolute value of negative 6. Well, we better resolve absolute value signs first. Absolute value of a negative number is just positive 6. We've got 6 plus 61. Well, we've got both positive numbers, so we're just going to add them together and keep the sign, which is positive. Now, example 5 makes us do the same thing, but with fractions. We have to have a common denominator when we add or subtract fractions. So we're going to choose a denominator of 9. The first fraction is fine like it is. The second fraction, I'm going to have to convert to something over 9. To get a 3 to become a 9, I had to multiply times 3, so I'll have to do the same to the denominator. And now I can write my fractions as everything over the denominator of 9. So I have a negative 5 plus 3. Negative 5 plus 3, opposite signs. I'll subtract, and I get a 2. And I have to keep the sign of the larger one, which is negative. So it'll be a negative 2 over 9. And it's okay to leave the negative in the numerator like that. It makes the whole fraction negative. Example 6. Let's just take these first two terms together. We're going to say negative 9 plus 15. Well, negative 9 plus 15 are opposite signs. I'm going to subtract them. It's the same as saying, 15 minus 9 and then keep the sign of the larger. 15 was larger and it's positive. Plus a negative 5, which is the same as saying 6 minus 5, isn't it? And gives me a 1 for an answer. Now, the example 7 has several absolute value, or two absolute value signs, but an interesting problem because inside this absolute value, I've got to figure out what that answer is before I take the positive value of that term. In other words, I can only take the positive value of what's in absolute value if there's just one number in there. But I have 9 plus negative 12. So what I have to do is say, what is 9 plus negative 12? It is really a negative 3. We subtracted them and kept the sign of the larger one. I'm going to leave it an absolute value because I'll take the absolute value of it later. First, I just wanted to get one term in there. So I've got absolute value of negative 3, which is 3, plus the absolute value of negative 16, which is 16. And that's easy enough. Both of them are positive. I'll add them together and keep the sign. Example 8 is negative an absolute value of negative 2. Now, what you have to remember is this negative that's out front has nothing to do with this negative that's inside. Let's just handle the absolute value of negative 2, and let's leave the negative out front standing there, okay? Absolute value of negative 2, it's 2. How did I get a negative 2 as my answer? There was a negative outside the absolute value sign, and I just brought it down. So the answer is negative 2. Example 10 is different. It's not absolute value. It is multiplication. It's the same thing as saying negative 1 times negative 3. When you have two negatives together, you can think about it, and then right outside parentheses, it becomes a positive. A negative times a negative gives us a positive. Next, let's look at something called additive inverse or opposite. Now, what we're trying to say is the additive inverse is something that we can add to a number. What can we add to it to equal a 0. I want it to equal 0. What would I add to 4 to equal 0? Well, 4 plus a negative 4 would give me 0. The additive inverse would be negative 4. What about the absolute value of negative 6? Well, first we have to decide what the absolute value of negative 6 is. The absolute value of negative 6 is going to be positive 6. What do I add to a negative 6 to get 0? Well, that would be negative 6. Example 12. What do I add to a negative 2 to get 0? I would add 2. And 14, well, to get 0, if I have 0, all I need, the additive inverse is just 0.